Hey everybody, welcome to Think Business Live. Looking forward to talking with Jim Rowe. Joe, it's great to connect with you. I'm looking forward to talking about your book. Such a clever name. Get Your Ducks in a Row, it reminded me a little bit of a playoff of your last name.
Right.
Writing and communication, think, write, present, and sell. And Get Your Ducks in a Row, book 2. You have a 2-book series, Adapter, Methods of Problem Solving, and Business Communication. Let's talk. Let's talk about Get Your Ducks in a Row, writing and communication. So here we are, where we're in a market, in a world where people don't read, they skim, they watch video but don't necessarily listen to it, and they read the captions.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as we sit here April 27th, 2022 live, how do people write today?
Not well. And so I will say that I started this book in the mid 2000s at my former agency before I retired, and I noticed young people were really struggling writing,
Yeah.
and so I was trained very well by this wonderful woman when I was early in my career, and she gave me this approach. It's sort of a 10-step, basically a marketing briefing document, but it helps you think. And I started noticing this and then got busy and retired. And so I started picking up it again. There's a lot of research out there right now that indicates there's 3 major studies: Pay Scale, Inside Higher Ed, and the American Association of Colleges and Universities. And managers say that between 45 and 75%, depending upon the survey, of recent grads they've hired are very bad at both critical thinking and communication, particularly writing. And in those same 2 out of the 3 studies also asked the grads to rate themselves. 2/3 to 80% said they're very proficient in it. So there's this, and that's what's now called as the skills gap, and it's a big issue.
Big disconnect.
A big disconnect. Yeah.
Yeah. And so with that, right, I think more people, especially with texting and things of that nature, many people write like they talk. And so writing has changed, and what's acceptable today may not have been acceptable in the past. But I want to go back to something you said when you talked about kind of the 10 simple steps, right? The formula that you're providing. I think one of the things people need more than ever today, Jim, is this formula, right? Like, okay, I want to learn how to write. I don't have time to take a class. So tell me in 10 steps, how to do it.
Well, yes, and it's interesting because I think I've been calling this the "don't take it for granted" tour. Everybody thinks they can think and write, but Tiger Woods and I both play golf. He does it a lot better than I do because he's constantly out there, and he's kind of, they train, they have coaches, that kind of thing. So that what I did is I looked at all the business books, and they're a couple of hundred pages, and they're a little dull. They're all very smart, but so I said we need to use the structured format, and it always worked for me. That's how I train dozens of young people getting out of school. That we need to all work from the same page, and it's really very simple. It's, you start with who's the audience, what is the purpose. I mean, basically, at the end of the day, you need, and I try to get people to get it down to one page. Who's the audience? What are you trying to tell them? What do they know? That's the background. What are their problems? Those are the issues. And what's the next step is, so what are you trying to accomplish? What are your objectives? And add metrics to them. From the objectives, you go to strategies. How are you going to fix it? Give me a rationale why you think it's going to work, hopefully with data. And then you start getting into the tactics and the ROI and timetable and next steps. It's a very simple process. It can be done in one page.
Yeah. And so let's just break down simple a little bit more, right? Mm-hmm. Because to get to simple, you need to, I think, start with the right mindset. You need to create the space. You need to create the environment to actually sit down and do the work to simplify it. And so just reverse engineer that a little bit to, just the process of actually sitting down to do the simple.
Well, I think, when we were all in school, they used to tell us, well, you start with an outline. And what I tell people is, get your ducks in a row. These 10 steps are the outline. And by going through each one of those things, you really do break it down. And the fact is that And I think this is a big disconnect too. Everybody says, "Oh, well, you have to read, and you need to read, and that's very good." But you know what? Reading is passive, and it's but writing is active. That's where the hard work is. So I have sort of coined the phrase. I'm applying for trademark for it. To write is to think. So
Mhm.
start with that as the foundation of what you need to do, and then get into the actual format and the structure. At the end of the day, when you leave this book, you should be able to write those 10 things down. And so
Yeah,
if I break it apart, kind of like I did, it's, purpose is who you're talking to. And so many people forget that. They give it to from their perspective. And then don't write a tome and there's all these wasted words. It's really get it down to the bare minimum. And so the simpler you can make it, the better. And if you can think through these 10 steps and just I hate to say it, but fill in the blanks.
yeah,
It forces you to think, write it in big type, and then you're going to be able to learn. Frankly, after you know this, one of the values is you learn to think on your feet. You don't
yeah.
need to have it in front of you anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. You make it like a Mad Lib, Jim, right? You make it like
Yes.
a Mad Lib. And so let's talk about, you know, the people that always fight with their GPS, right? So it's like the GPS gives you the direction where you're at, and then it gives you the next one, et cetera. And so you've created this structure. It still requires somebody to have the discipline to follow what you've already created. And
Mhm.
so, how does somebody, do you flip through it in its entirety? Are there shortcuts, right? Or when people take the shortcuts, how do you get them back into alignment to just follow the script?
Well, each one of those words represents a thought pattern. And so you need to stay on script. And how many meetings go around the world? Think about the production, the loss of productivity from people just chatting. So I've had several sales guys say to me, I think I can use this in my meetings because they're all over the place. So if everybody walks in a room and everybody just starts as, okay, what are we here to do today? And what are the problem we're trying to solve, and what would we like it to accomplish? If you stay on point and you look at each one of those words, I actually am created a one pager that has each one of those thoughts, and with in parentheses a few different words for each one of them to say, make sure you don't leave this topic until you go to the next one. And it really is a logical flow. You really can't jump to the next one and that's what happens a lot, as you know, in meetings. People are jumping all over the places. No, let's
Yeah.
stay on point. Let's figure out what the problem is before we find out the solution.
Yeah, let's talk about that being on point. You mentioned earlier that there's this disconnect with critical thinking in today's world.
Yes.
It's really one of the things I've been talking to people about and seeing is that even colleges are doing their best in this decade to teach adaptability and critical thinking. I see it in the work that my kids are doing. My son is doing in college, and my daughter is doing as a sophomore in high school, because in a pre-COVID recent study, it showed that 30%, that by the year 2030, 85% of the jobs that exist don't exist today,
Mm.
which is going to require a new form of critical thinking, a new form of adapting to what these new markets are.
Well,
And
it's good
so,
that you've seen this in your kids, because what
yeah,
I'm reading is that a lot of the colleges they've spent so much time shifting because the corporations said I need them to have these hard skills. So there's only so many classes in a week. So they shifted away from some of the liberal arts, the thinking and the writing,
right.
and so a lot of managers are saying they're not learning it in the schools.
Yeah. Well, I think that's another topic as far as, what they teach that's applicable in actually the life, but I can see the critical thinking coming to life.
No, that's
But
good.
the question I have for you is, you're talking a lot about solving a problem.
Mhm.
I want to know, because one of the things I see as a business coach when I'm in, whether it's solopreneurs or fortune companies, is people don't really understand what the real problem is, right? Getting to the root of the problem. So talk a little bit about, your structure and how people can use it to get to the root of a problem, the bedrock, of the issue.
The issue being that they're not thinking properly.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't think people really understand how to think through critical thinking and the concept. Actually, book two is the started out as the appendix of book one. Book one was here's a quick little guide to show you. Book two the adapter method stands for, it's an acronym that stands for analyze, deduce, author, perform, tackle, evaluate, and refine. I don't think people are trained, and that's the one great thing about marketing, is they're not trained in the holistic business cycle, but you got to start
Mhm.
with analysis. So I think the biggest problem is people don't start understanding their business. I mean, you think everybody would do it, but one of the tools we've all used is the SWOT analysis.
Yeah.
If you don't have data, at least get that. But before you go through, and let's face it, a lot of people in business didn't get a business degree. They've
Right.
gotten a job and they're very good tactically a certain thing or another. So a lot of particularly the smaller corporations I've worked with who need a fractional type CMO is, the senior guy is very smart. No, maybe a couple of senior folks, but there's a lot of people in the company, whether they're 15 or 20 people or, even up to 100, that these folks don't necessarily have had that kind of training. So to me, that's the benefit of the adapter method in book two, is it walks them through the process of needing to understand what the problem is. And you got to do that through data and through analysis, and the concept of the difference between analysis and deduction. Once you found out the problem, how do you fix it? And creative thinking. So I go into all that in book two.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about book two, because book two is coming out, I think, when, today-ish?
Well, I'm trying to work through some things. So if it's not today, I'll say next week for sure. And
Okay.
then it always takes Amazon a few days to approve it. You probably know that. So
Yeah.
let's assume next week.
Okay. So let's assume next week. So let's talk about that, right? So the problem solving element of things, and you're talking about in this book, learn the adapter. Kind of share with the Think community a little bit about what the adapter is. As
Well,
far as how you interpret it.
yeah, as I started writing it, I had all these things I've learned in 45 years of marketing and dealing with lots of companies. And I started writing about them, and I realized as a brand guy, there's no cohesive overall thought here. So I came up with the acronym. And as I indicated, you need to start with analysis. And I have some quotes in there like, data is your hammer and shield. Without it, the person with the biggest voice or the biggest title wins. So everybody get their facts together. Let's start there. And then once you do that, let's analyze them, see what goes, notice where some of the anomalies are and see if you can address them. So that's the analysis part.
Yeah.
And if you don't have data, start with a SWOT analysis. At least you have that. Then you move to deduction and looking at the data. I remember being in an organization where we were on the liquor business. I was the spirit VP, and there was the guys over on the price brands. And we went to the same CEO basically for our annual business plans, and we would show the data, and then we'd say, here's our findings, here's our conclusions.
Mm-hmm.
The other team apparently went in and said, here's our findings, and went to the next page. And he said, so what? You need to have that so what? And then once you have you do your findings, your conclusions, what are the implications of that? Okay, if you think this is, how much is that going to cost us? How much time is it going to take? So it's a very I think it's a very structured way of looking at it, and again, still with the same kind of fun, easy way to remember it. I view these as both practical teaching tools and reference guides.
Yeah, I love it. Well, and I love how you're talking about fun, because I think everything needs to be quick, easy, and fun today for people to receive it. I want to kind of talk about that theory, as well as just going back a little bit to the critical thinking that you're talking about, because, I love the title of your book. And one of the things I'm finding as a business coach is, no matter what it is, everyone's trying to get their ducks in a row on a day-to-day basis, right? It's kind of like they wake up and they say to themselves, whether they say it, I think they think it or feel it or sense it. How do I need to get my ducks in a row today? What are the tools I need for today, right? Because everything seems to be changing so quickly today. Time seems to be going fast and slow at the same time. And so how does somebody, from your perspective, Jim, get their ducks in a row every morning? What do they need in their arsenal to really get their ducks in a row for their business day, where they can then kind of have their business day, their personal time, their family time? What does everybody need to do to kind of start the day and end the day with some level of alignment?
Well, it's funny. I think I've been reading a couple of books at the same time. I think I just got this out of your book, but I like the idea of when you wake up in the morning. I hate to say it as simple as this, but write down the 4 or 5 things you absolutely must do. And
Absolutely.
so to me, I pretty much do that. I live on lists, but I've been more focused on prioritizing them now because all of a sudden the list becomes unwieldy and you stop looking at it. So I've actually been doing that every 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
Every day writing down okay, if I don't get anything else done, and I have, not only do I want to get these books out, and I don't feel like I'm moving fast enough, and I want to move
Yeah.
fast through all the things that you pointed out in your book, but I also have a client that I have to respond to, and I'm very client sensitive after 30
Yeah.
years on that side. So
Yeah.
I think some of these things are just 101 simple techniques that people just don't use.
Yeah. They don't use, and I think they need, would you say they maybe need that kind of daily reminder almost to like, because it's funny. I mean, I typically meet with clients, once a week or every other week. And sometimes a week goes by and it seems like to them and to me that it's been a month, right? And so do you find yourself like every morning saying, wow, it's yesterday seemed like a week ago?
Yeah. Well, I've actually had my client say that the other day.
Yeah.
We're trying to, we've just launched this live streaming site, and he said to me, I kept saying, well, that's a month later. And he said, now it's 2 days from now. And
Right.
so, yes. And I actually do think simple things, human nature things, like think about, write down the 10 things and now say, okay, prioritize them that you need to do. And that's a big
Right.
help. The only thing you need to do is also put those goalposts in so that you don't get yourself stuck in the minutia of tactical day-to-day things. But
Yeah.
I try and do it as big picture, which is why I've been pushing to get the second book out. And I had some emails I had to answer this morning, and then I worked on that, and I'm sitting there working through some of those pieces today.
Good. Good. I
Mhm.
love it. So let's go back. Let's rewind, 30, 40, however many years you want to go back.
Okay.
You're an entrepreneur, you're an author, you're a marketing guy, you're a branding guy. You've got a successful business. Who was one of the very first mentors that you had that kind of planted the seed that you knew in real time, or you can look back in hindsight, that got you to where you are today?
Well, thank you for asking that question because I think you know the answer. And that is when I was, well, first of all, my dad was a real smart guy, and he just passed away last year, 12 days shy of 94.
Oh,
He was valedictorian of St. John's. And, so I grew up in a house where he would come home at 6 o'clock, 6:10, we were eating dinner, and he would talk about his day. So I picked up a lot of that. But in terms of business, when I got my first brand marketing assignment, my boss was a woman named Connie Humphrey. I'm still very close to her. She grew up. She grew up in the Bronx. Went to Sarah Lawrence. Went to the London School of Economics. Dual MBA in finance and marketing at Columbia. Then went to Colgate Palmolive, and then I started working with her at Lorillard. And she pretty much taught me this get your ducks in a row process, and thinking through. And I remember saying one day, you got to learn the writing thing because that's very important. And over the years, I've stayed in touch with her, and she was a big part of my career. B, she's also, her name is Connie Humphrey, but in the book, she's Connie Duckfrey.
hmm,
And that was
I
and
like it.
I sent her the thought, and I said to her, would you mind if I sent her the book in the first draft in a Word doc? And she was very flattered, and she said, I feel like I'm reading my Bible.
Yeah.
And in book two, the big thing and the big success story is book one. Book two, she was invited back to Columbia Duck University and to talk to the Studux about the process and the success of Get Your Ducks in a Row. And she goes through those 10, the adapter method with each one of the students and gets their reaction. So it was a wonderful way for me to let the thought out. But she was really the mentor. And I've had good bosses over the years, but and I actually saw her only a few weeks ago down in Florida. So
Good.
it's nice to still be knowing each other after 45 years.
Yeah, I love it. That's a beautiful story. We all need mentors,
Hmm.
and people who knew us back in the day.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
we can tap into that energy. I love it. All right, Jim. Quick speed round. You ready?
yeah.
Favorite book and why?
Who moved my cheese?
Oh,
Um,
the
it,
best. I just want to say when the pandemic hit, I gave my kids, this was 2 years ago, a couple books. And I said, if you read each of these books, I'll give you $50 if you read it and talk to me about it, $100 if you read it and write a one-page paper. And the first
what a
book,
great idea.
yeah, and the first book was Who Moved My Cheese, because it's so simple, it's complicated.
Learn to adapt.
Yeah,
You
learn
know,
to adapt.
I gave it
Yeah,
to my daughter, and she called me. She was a TV reporter before she had kids up here in Long Island,
yeah.
and she would call me because things were going on with the parent company. And she said, "Daddy," she'd call me on the way home. She goes, "Daddy, the cheese is flying all over the place."
I love it.
So,
Best piece. I love it. Best piece of wisdom you've ever received.
wow. Oh, you stumped me on that one. I guess it's family is the most important.
Yeah. Amen to that. Finish this sentence. One thing everybody needs to do to kind of bring out their inner writer is.
Start.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it.
Everybody's afraid of it. Just start. If you sit and think about it, you're never going to get there.
Define yourself in one word.
Love.
Tell everybody how they can connect with you, buy your books, learn more about you, and all that other great stuff.
Jim at jimrowemarketing.com. That's ROWE. And it's split in half, the agency part as well as the books.
All right, good. And your ideal client is
somebody who we both respect each other, and they're as committed as I am.
I love it. I love it. All right, good. Jim, this was a pleasure. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, I love your book. I love what
liked
you're
yours.
talking about. Thank you so much for taking time to read it. A pleasure getting to know you. I appreciate your thoughts, your wisdom, and that you take all of your experience and you broke it down to make it simple for people. And simplicity sells. And I'm always appreciative when I can talk to somebody who's so bright and can break it down to the simple. I'm a business coach. I work with successful people who are stuck. And I love this podcast because I can bring guests on that can get people continually unstuck in whatever they're doing.
Yeah, I love the unstuck thought.
Or their life. Yeah, thank you. So, Jim, thanks so much. Think community, if Jim can help you in any way, please reach out and check out his books on Amazon.com. Tell them one more time, both the names, Jim.
Well, they're both called the series Get Your Ducks in a Row. The first one is Think Right, Present, and Sell. And the second one is called Learn the Adapter Method. And the easiest place to find them, frankly, because there's a lot of Get Your Ducks in a Row without the E on the end of it, is to go to my website, jimrowemarketing.com.
All right. I love it. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it.
Thank you, John.